In our last journey, we explored Midgard, the realm of humanity. But beyond the walls of men and the golden halls of Asgard lies a land untamed, Jotunheim, the world of giants. Here, storms rage, mountains rise like spears, and ancient beings challenge even the gods themselves. This is Episode 3 of the 9 Realms series, the Realm of Giants. Far beyond the ordered beauty of Asgard and the fragile balance of Midgard lay a realm of raw power and chaos. Jotunheim, the land of giants. It was a place untamed, filled with towering mountains, endless forests, and frozen wastelands. Where Asgard gleamed with golden halls, Jotunheim roared with storms and the howl of icy winds. The Jötnar, the giants of Norse myth, made this place their home. They were beings of immense strength and ancient power, older even than many of the gods. Some were creatures of frost, born from the icy rivers of Niflheim. Others embodied stone, fire, or the wild forests. They were not all evil, but they were dangerous, unpredictable, and forever at odds with the gods of Asgard. For the Norse, Jotunheim represented the forces of nature, wild, uncontrollable, and often hostile. It was the counterbalance to the order of Asgard and the fragile safety of Midgard. Here dwelled not only monstrous beings, but also cunning and wise giants who challenged the gods not only with brute force, but also with riddles, magic, and tricks. At the edge of the World Tree, Jotunheim stood as a constant reminder. Beyond the walls of Midgard and the halls of Asgard, chaos was never far away. The land of Jotunheim was vast, and so too were its inhabitants. The Jötnar were not all alike. They came in many forms, each tied to the primal forces of nature. Some were frost giants, born of Niflheim's icy rivers. Their breath carried storms, and their bodies shimmered with frozen armor. They represented the cold that could kill crops, freeze seas, and humble even the strongest warriors. Others were fire giants, connected not only to Muspelheim, but also to the chaos of flame itself. Though Surtur and his kin dwelled in the fiery realm, their presence echoed in Jotunheim as well. They embodied destruction, but also renewal, the blaze that clears the old and makes way for the new. There were also stone giants and mountain giants, beings of the earth itself. Their steps shook the ground, and their voices echoed like thunder through the valleys. Some were monstrous, others wise and ancient, keepers of secrets the gods themselves feared. Not every giant was cruel. Some were cunning, others fair in trade, and a few even formed bonds with the gods. Yet most stood as rivals, reminders that the world was not made for harmony alone. The Jötnar were the eternal counterbalance, the wild storm against the golden order of Asgard, the chaos forever testing the strength of gods and mortals alike. The story of Jotunheim could never be told without the endless struggle between the giants and the gods of Asgard. The Aesir and the Jötnar were bound together by fate, rivals, enemies, and yet, at times, uneasy allies. From the very beginning, the gods feared the power of the giants. The walls of Asgard were raised to hold them back, and countless battles were fought along the borders where Midgard and Jotunheim nearly touched. Thor, the thunder god, became the eternal champion against the giants. His hammer, Mjolnir, struck down frost giants in storm and fire, his journeys across Jotunheim filling saga after saga. But this conflict was not always one of open war. The Aesir also sought wisdom and power from their enemies. Odin himself traveled to the giants, trading oaths, riddles, and sometimes even blood for the knowledge they guarded. The Jötnar were fierce, but they were not fools. Many wielded magic as strong as the gods, and their cunning often proved more dangerous than their strength. The relationship was complex. Gods and giants fought, yet they also intermarried. From such unions came powerful beings, neither wholly divine nor wholly giant, who carried the strength of both worlds. In this way, Jotunheim was not just the enemy of Asgard, but also its mirror, shaping the fate of the gods as much as resisting them. In every saga, the conflict between the Aesir and the Jötnar served as a reminder. Even the gods were not free from challenge. Order could not exist without chaos pressing at its gates. Not all battles in Jotunheim were fought with steel and thunder. Some were battles of wit, riddles, and illusions. Among the giants, none was more cunning than Utgard-Loki, a master trickster whose very hall was built on deception. One of the most famous tales tells of Thor, Loki, and their companions traveling into Jotunheim, seeking to prove their strength. They arrived at the great hall of Utgard-Loki, who welcomed them with mockery and challenges. But these were no ordinary contests. Each was a test cloaked in illusion. Thor, strongest of the gods, was asked to drink from a simple horn. He tried and failed, not knowing the horn was connected to the sea itself. Each gulp lowered the ocean, though he could not see it. He was then challenged to lift a cat from the ground. Thor strained with all his might, yet only managed to raise one of its paws. But the cat was no cat. It was the Midgard serpent, Jörmungandr, disguised, coiled around the world. Finally, Thor faced an old woman in wrestling. With all his strength, he could not bring her down. She was no ordinary woman, but old age itself, undefeated by any god or man. In each trial, Thor was humbled. The laughter of Utgard-Loki filled the hall, but the lesson was clear. Even the strongest gods could be fooled by cunning and magic. When Thor reached for his hammer to strike, the illusions dissolved, and the hall of Utgard-Loki vanished into mist. The gods were left standing in the cold wilderness of Jotunheim, reminded that brute force could not conquer every challenge. Not all giants in the Norse sagas were nameless enemies. Some stood out in legend, shaping the fate of gods and men alike. Skadi, the goddess of winter. Among the most famous was Skadi, daughter of the giant Thiazi. When her father was slain by the Aesir, Skadi armed herself and marched to Asgard, demanding vengeance. Instead of battle, she struck a bargain. She would choose a husband from among the gods, but only by looking at their feet. Hoping to win Balder, she accidentally chose Njord, god of the sea. Their marriage was short and troubled, but Skadi's story showed that giants could claim honor and power equal to the gods themselves. She became a goddess of winter, skis, and the hunt. Proof that Jotunheim gave more than monsters. It gave figures of strength and independence. Hrungnir, the stone-headed giant. Then there was Hrungnir, whose skull was made of stone and whose heart was sharp-edged and cold. Drunk on ale, he once boasted in Asgard that he would topple the gods and carry off Freya. Thor challenged him, and their battle shook the earth. In the duel, Thor slew Hrungnir with Mjolnir, but Hrungnir's heavy leg crushed Thor, pinning him until his son Magni freed him. The tale was a reminder that even victory over a giant carried a price. Thrym, the thief of Mjolnir. Another tale told of Thrym, the giant who stole Thor's hammer and buried it deep in the earth. He demanded Freya as his bride in exchange for its return. To outwit him, Thor disguised himself as Freya, wedding gown and all, and stormed into the feast. When Mjolnir was brought forth to bless the marriage, Thor seized it, revealed himself, and struck Thrym down. The story was both comical and epic, showing that even gods sometimes needed trickery to outsmart their foes. These giants, Skadi, Hrungnir, Thrym, were more than villains. They were essential to the myths, shaping the adventures, trials, and triumphs of the gods. Without Jotunheim, the sagas of the Aesir would have been incomplete. The edges of Jotunheim were places of tension, where order and chaos met face to face. Unlike Asgard, which was guarded by shining walls, or Midgard, encircled by Ymir's brows, Jotunheim spilled outward, wild and unchecked. Its borders touched the lands of men and brushed dangerously close to the gods. To the north, glaciers and frozen seas marked the realm's edge, where frost giants roamed like living storms. To the east, mountains rose jagged and sharp, cliffs where eagles circled and trolls hid in shadow. To the south and west, great rivers cut through valleys, sometimes flowing into Midgard itself. Reminders that the giants were never far from the world of men. For the gods, these borderlands were both a threat and a passage. Thor often crossed them, seeking out giants in combat, his hammer echoing against the mountains. Odin too wandered the edges, trading words and riddles with ancient giants whose knowledge rivaled his own. For mortals, the borderlands were places of fear. Travelers spoke of sudden storms, of strangers taller than trees glimpsed in the mist, of voices carried on the wind. Crossing too far into these lands was dangerous, but some still ventured there, hunters, exiles, or fools seeking power. The border between Jotunheim and the other realms was never a wall, but a storm. It shifted, it threatened, and it reminded both gods and men that beyond their fragile order, chaos waited only a step away. The final destiny of Jotunheim was bound to the end of all things, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. When the fated day arrived, the giants would march from their wild realm to bring ruin upon the cosmos. At the front came Surtur, the fire giant, with his blazing sword brighter than the sun. Though his true home was Muspelheim, his alliance with the Jötnar meant that Jotunheim's strength would march beside him. From the seas rose Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, its coils shaking the earth and whipping the ocean into storms. The skies split with the wings of monstrous eagles and the tread of stone-skinned giants, while frost giants roared like avalanches crashing down the mountains. The armies of Jotunheim poured into Vigrid Plain, where the last battle would rage. Odin and the Aesir faced them, knowing the outcome was already written. Gods and giants locked in struggle, felling one another in wave after wave. Thor would slay the serpent, but only at the cost of his own life. Odin would fall to Fenrir, and all the realms, Midgard among them, would be drowned in fire and flood. For the Norse, the role of Jotunheim in Ragnarok was clear. The realm of giants was not just an enemy, but the agent of fate itself. The giants were chaos given flesh, and in the end, it was chaos that would sweep away the order of gods and men alike. Though the sagas often cast the giants as enemies of the gods, their true legacy was far more complex. The Jötnar were not merely villains to be slain. They were the very forces that shaped the cosmos. From the beginning, it was a giant, Ymir, whose body gave birth to the world itself. Without him, there would be no Midgard, no mountains, no seas, no sky. The bones of chaos became the foundation for order, proving that creation itself was born from destruction. The giants also embodied the eternal struggle between balance and wildness. They were the storms that toppled ships, the winters that tested farmers, the mountains that loomed over valleys. To the Norse, these were not abstract ideas, but daily realities. The Jötnar gave shape to the dangers and mysteries of life itself. Even the gods were bound to them. Odin's wisdom came from giants, Thor's greatest battles were against them, and marriages between Aesir and Jötnar wove their destinies together. The two sides were locked in opposition, but also independence, for without chaos, there can be no order. In Ragnarök, the giants fulfilled their role as the ultimate challengers. But even after the world's end, their presence lingered in the new dawn as a reminder that life is never without struggle. The legacy of Jotunheim is thus not one of defeat, but of endurance. The giants taught that power is wild, that fate is inevitable, and that even gods must face forces greater than themselves. In the Norse imagination, Jotunheim was eternal, not only a place on the map of Yggdrasil, but a truth in the soul of the world. Thank you for joining me in this chapter of the Nine Realms series. If you enjoyed this journey, remember to like, subscribe, and share so we can explore the next realm together.